Insulin is the most important hormone in the body. It is going to determine cancer, diabetes, Alzheimer's, how well we are storing fat, how well we are burning fat. So let's get into what insulin is. Insulin is a hormone that is secreted by the pancreas. When we eat, our body is converting energy, right? And we have all of this glucose from the food that we eat. Our body uses glucose as a fuel source. So how does it use glucose as a fuel source? Well, instead of being in the bloodstream, it has to get into our cells so our cells can use it. So we eat, our pancreas pumps out insulin. The insulin is getting the glucose out of our blood and into our cells. Boom. Now that's going to be used as energy. After that, it's going to take the excess glucose and store it as glycogen for short-term energy. That's going to be in our muscles. Once those muscles are completely filled with the glucose, it's going to store the rest as triglycerides, also known as fat. So that's stored energy. Now, when we have a lot of glucose in the system and a lot of refined sugars and a lot of refined carbohydrates, remember starches, carbohydrates, they might look like pizza and bagels. They might look like oats. They might look like French fries. But when they get into the body and they get converted into energy, it just turns into glucose. So when we're eating a high refined sugar, high refined carbohydrate diet, now we have excess glucose in the blood and we need to get it out of the blood. Glucose cannot be in our blood. It is toxic in the blood. Think of sugar. Think of caramel. It's very sticky, right? So we don't want all that stickiness in our blood because it's going to stop our blood vessels from working. It's going to be like a traffic jam. It's going to be metabolic catastrophe if we have all of this glucose in our blood. When we have excess, now the pancreas and the body is like, we need more insulin because we need to get all of this toxic glucose out of our blood into our cells, into our muscles, or store it as fat. So when we are consistently pumping out this insulin because one, we might be eating throughout the whole day. We might start with a sugary breakfast in the morning and just be snacking, eat a lunch, snacking, eat a dinner, maybe have a late night snack. The whole day, our body is pumping out insulin, right? So eventually, our cells become insulin resistant. These insulin resistant cells now are no longer hearing the signals from the insulin to get this glucose into the cell, right? Now we have an excess of insulin. One, our pancreas is working overload. Two, where is this excess glucose going to go first? Well, it's going to first go to the liver. So have you heard of fatty liver? Fatty liver is because we have so much glucose, we don't know where to put it. It's first going to go in our liver. After it goes in our liver and there's not enough room to store the fat on our liver, it's going to spread out into our organs. That's what's called visceral fat. So if you have belly fat and you can't see your toes, that is fat that's surrounding your organs. It's different from subcutaneous fat, which is like under your arms and things like that. Visceral fat is very dangerous. It's metabolically active, and that means it's like leaking all of these toxins, right? So we do not want visceral fat. And the subcutaneous fat is a little different. It's like stored energy. It's not necessarily that harmful. It's kind of just outside of the body storing this energy. We're going to use it for ketones once we have a glucose deficit. However, this visceral fat is super bad. This insulin resistance is super bad. A high level of insulin in the body is also going to stop nitric oxide production. So nitric oxide is what's used to dilate our blood vessels and relax our blood vessels. And when our nitric oxide is low, or when our body is not able to receive the signals from the nitric oxide to dilate our blood vessels become stiff, they become smaller, they become more brittle. So now we need more repair for our blood vessels. We aren't going to be having the blood flow and the oxygen flow to all of our organs, sex organs, brain. That's caused erectile dysfunction. That's what's causing the hypoxia of the brain. Hypoxia means lack of oxygen. And that's just because our blood vessels are so thin and so brittle and so stiff that the flow isn't running properly through them. Insulin is also a growth hormone, and it's gonna stop apoptosis. So let's break both of those down. Apoptosis is cellular death, and it's controlled or programmed cellular death. So our cells have to die and renew and recycle. When they don't die, or they're not taking in the signal for apoptosis, now that's where cancer is forming. That's where cells are proliferating uncontrollably. Uncontrolled proliferation of cells is cancer. So The insulin is promoting that because it is a growth hormone. There's also more insulin receptors on tumors and on cancer cells than there are on regular cells. So when this abundance of insulin is in the body, cancer is going to be wanting to proliferate. Insulin also is a storage hormone. It's signaling the body to store fat. So when the insulin is high, everything in the body is saying store fat, store fat, store fat. It's not saying burn fat, burn fat, burn fat. We are not gonna be able to burn fat, like physically, no matter how hard we train, no matter what we do. If our insulin is high, the body is never going to get the signal to start burning the fat. So we're just gonna be storing it all the time. So it impedes lipolysis. Lipolysis is the metabolic process of burning fat. And insulin literally says no lipolysis. So if we wanna burn fat, we have to have insulin sensitive cells so we're not always storing this fat. When we have insulin resistant cells, our cells are no longer going to be able to take in this glucose either, because insulin is the signal to take in glucose. But when we're insulin resistant, we're not hearing the signal to take in the glucose. When our cells cannot take in this glucose, they need to find some other energy source. So now they're going to start producing ADP as opposed to ATP. ATP is adenosine triphosphate. It is our cellular currency, our energy currency. Now we have to produce adenosine diphosphate, which is a worse form of energy currency. And it's less efficient. And in order to create it, our cells have to be in a very acidic place now. So they use these lactic acids in order to create adenosine diphosphate. That acidic environment that is needed to create the adenosine diphosphate is very bad for the cell. And now all of that acid is getting onto the cell and it's weakening the cell and it's weakening the function of our mitochondria. Mitochondria are the powerhouse of the cell. It is the battery of the cell. And we can't have a weakened mitochondria. When our mitochondria are dysfunctional and now we are producing this adenosine diphosphate, we have a very acidic environment. That's where the cancer is going to proliferate. And the insulin is a growth hormone for the cancer. We're not taking in glucose. We have to create adenosine diphosphate. We need an acid environment to create that. Cancer lives in the acid environment, and insulin is a growth hormone to the cancer. So now we see how that is a very negative feedback. When our body is not able to turn food into energy, especially our brain, now certain things are going to stop working so that we're able to function. If you have a house and it's running on 30% of the energy that it can, you're not gonna be able to run your laundry and have the refrigerator and have your TV going and have your radio. You're gonna have to turn some of these things off, or else you're gonna have a circuit break and everything's gonna have no more energy, you know what I mean? So your brain is like, in order to stay alive, I'm gonna have to cut certain things off so that I can be alive. And that's where your dementia comes in. Because of all of this insulin resistance, you're not first getting a lot of blood going to the brain because the nitric oxide has been weakened or the nitric oxide has been compromised, right? So this compromised nitric oxide means there's not a lot of oxygen or blood getting into the brain. And then your body is not even able to turn glucose, which is the #1 fuel for our brain, into energy. So now our brain is working super hard and it's gonna have to cut certain things off in order to stay alive. And that's where the dementia and Alzheimer's is coming from. So this insulin resistance is going to lead to stored fat, visceral fat. It's gonna lead to diabetes. It's going to lead to diabetes in the brain, which is dementia. It's going to lead to high blood pressure. It's going to lead to cancer and have more environments where this cancer can live. So we really want to become insulin sensitive. In order to become insulin sensitive, there's a couple things we can do. Intermittent fasting is one of the most important. Fasting in general, but definitely intermittent fasting, because the more we eat, the more insulin is getting pumped out. So I would suggest, if you're very insulin resistant, to have a 6-hour window of eating, 12 p.m. to 6 p.m. or 2 p.m. to 8 p.m. If you are just wanting to make sure your insulin is in check, I would do a 12 to 8. So between the hours of 12 and 8, you can eat as much as you want, but after those hours, we're not eating. I would implement, if you're very insulin resistant, I would implement a 48-hour fast once a month, water fast. If you're in like crisis mode, I would do a 24-hour fast once a week. Carbohydrates and glucose and sugar, fructose, all of that is going to increase our insulin levels because there's going to be more sugar in our blood, right? So to decrease the amount of insulin that we have in the body or being pumped out by the pancreas, we have to reduce the amount of refined sugars and refined carbs that we are eating. So that's going to be all of your bagels, all of your pizza, your French fries. It's going to be most of your breads. Sourdough is the only exception to that. And it's going to be a lot of your sugary foods, sugary beverages. A lot of the beverages that you drink, you might not even know have 25 to 30 grams of sugar in them. So nothing with more than 5 grams of added sugar, and then nothing that is going to turn into glucose, which is your starches and your refined carbohydrates. So if we have a low carb, low sugar diet, we're intermittent fasting, and we might incorporate a 48-hour fast once a month, we're going to be able to increase our insulin sensitivity, and that's going to do wonders for the body.